meeting room. So welcome to our first sort of like a portfolio presentation series. So as we mentioned in the previous talk with Alex Moran, like all these talks are like kind of like curated to kind of like consider and like meditate upon the idea of a digital futures among an earthly land, looking at the intersection between technology and reality, and kind of like challenging our perception of what's real and what's not. So today I'm delighted to present on both Anna's and Jess's work. So does any one of you like do you have any like preference of who want to go first or not?
I'm easy.
Okay, Anna, do you want to go first then?
Cool.
Yeah, Anna can go first.
Damn, I was too easy.
So yeah, so I think before they start, I'll just give like a brief introduction. So Anna is presenting her work, something where there should be nothing, nothing where there should be something. So it's an ongoing series that weaves a phantasmal narrative through the forging of images past and present, and the series aims to explore the egress between this world and another, creating an alternative reality that's devoid of time and space. So I'll leave it up to Anna to present her work. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you very much. Just wait for my laptop to decide to load. Cool. Can you all see that?
Yep.
Is it gone full screen?
Yep, full screen.
Yay.
Yeah.
So as Isaiah said, I'm just going to be talking a little bit about my current project, Something Where There Should Be Nothing, Nothing Where There Should Be Something. And the title of the work and the kind of contextual backbone for it is drawn from Mark Fisher's book, The Weird and the Eerie, which is a really interesting, kind of fascinating book where he explores this notion of the weird and the eerie in relation to kind of our current kind of social and economical stance, as well as literature and films and books. And so as the little introduction that just went on, essentially the work is about creating an alternative reality, or kind of creating the illusion of an enigma, as if there is something going on, a kind of mythological story as such, through creating this kind of cognitive eerie. So it's not necessarily kind of being told something, but this lack of resolution to the work is essentially what intends to make it eerie or kind of confusing to us, because of our human nature of always wanting to find answers, especially in this kind of current digital age. But I just kind of, because it is still a work in progress, and I kind of see it as almost a chapter one to maybe some other works that will go on in the future. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about the different pieces of work that have gone into it, and how I see them to kind of create this wider piece anyway. So first of all, there's these non-photographic pieces that go into the work, kind of graphs and numbers and geometric symbols, which I'll show you on the next page. But they came initially from this idea of ley lines, which is a concept developed by a man called Alfred Watkins in the early 20th century. And essentially what he said is that all these kind of historical monuments in sites across the world are connected by these straight lines. Kind of, I guess, quite a simple concept in essence, but in the kind of 60s, it got picked back up again and was kind of mythologized to become this thing where people said that these ley lines harbored energies. They carried kind of good and bad energies. And when ley lines converged, as you can probably see on the map on the left screen, like they did at Glastonbury quite a lot, there is quite a lot of energy. And I just found it really fascinating how this concept became, I don't know, progressed to become this thing that was kind of really quite spiritual and in essence a myth. So I began reading this book about ley lines, and it is essentially this man a dowser, as he calls himself, who goes to these different locations, and he essentially tries to measure the energies of these rocks in various different ways. And I found it kind of fascinating how he is almost trying to measure or prove that this unprovable thing kind of exists. And I found myself believing it more because of these, just simply because of these geometric symbols in these graphs, even though I didn't necessarily understand what they were telling me. So that in essence forms part of the work. And then another part of the work, kind of before my own images, is the use of family archives. So like I said, I wanted to create this kind of this idea of mythic time through this kind of combination of my own images and archival images, and again produce this illusion of factuality that I think comes quite a lot from archival images. They seem for some reason more authentic, but it's also about this kind of this perceived reality and this almost other world. You know, these are from albums from my grandfather who I didn't know, and I found it really fascinating to kind of think about my own lived reality in relation to this other reality that existed before me, that has somehow kind of had an impact on my own reality in a sense. And then I was kind of reading this book called The Shell and the Kernel by Nicholas Abraham, and he talks about how the sense of both the world and the consciousness itself resides in a trans-phenomenological realm. I'm glad I got that right. Beyond the reach of direct apprehension. And I found this really fascinating. It kind of started to link back to the kind of world we live in at the moment and that digital realm about, you know, we have this our one kind of perceived world, but some things are kind of beyond our apprehension, especially the way technology is progressing and we kind of sit within our world. It is kind of incomprehensible sometimes, and that can often be the most eerie thing, is when we as humans can't find an answer or we can't conceptualize something. And then these are kind of some of the still life images that make up the project, and they focus on this idea of nothing where there should be something, kind of part of the title of my work. And Fisher talks about the nature of eeriness being something where there should be nothing, nothing where there should be something. And I really wanted to explore this by kind of creating this absence within some images, kind of like the empty vase or the plant that should have some orchid flowers but doesn't, in a sense to kind of create this myth and almost the absence of the image, making us question more what is in fact going on. And then kind of taking these images of all of these objects, I became aware of and quite interested in this idea of object-orientated ontology, because I found even myself, I look at kind of objects and things in relation to me in this quite kind of humanist perspective, which we tend to do. But object-orientated ontology kind of talks about objects as they exist away from us as humans, kind of exploring them as having their own reality and their own agency. And I think that's kind of really fascinating and in itself quite an eerie thing to think about, simply again because it is kind of beyond our human conception and control. Yeah, and then I bring in these sort of images, which are again kind of staged still life images that talk about our position as human beings within the wider context of our world, where we're trying to piece these things together. And I guess these kind of link back to these sort of quotes. They're linking back to our wider I guess social economical context of capitalism, as well as the fact that we are kind of nodes within these feedback loops, which is something that Jay Forrester talks about in relation to cybernetics, which I found really interesting, that these kind of technology and as such and the systems are almost built off nature, and if we see ourselves in that way as these nodes and feedback loops, it becomes quite an eerie thing to think about. And I think the work has this kind of, there's a lot going on, but again, these images are kind of my surroundings, I became interested in this idea of like revealing and concealing, and this idea of like portals between different realities. So this kind of harsh flash revealing this scene, but also the kind of the things in the way of the houses not quite letting us know what they are. And as well, these doors literally acting as portals to different worlds, which essentially they are, which came mostly kind of from David Lynch's work, with his use of like curtains and doorways as always being this entry into another dimension. And I think what is also quite interesting is this idea that the world in which we live is kind of more profoundly alien and strange than we had previously imagined. And kind of looking at things from that new perspective, especially I think in terms of technology, and even our immediate surroundings, like looking at that kind of circuit board image a few slides back, just kind of seeing the inside of that computer that you didn't really, I don't know, you don't see usually, was kind of quite strange to me. And so I then started taking images of my sort of immediate surroundings within my house and my relative's house, to kind of build up, I guess, again, this illusion of factuality that comes from the work. So kind of like this certificate and this family image, and then these images of a dresser, just trying to create, again, this mythic time. We can't really place these images. So that's those, yeah. And then I guess it comes back to this idea of what Fisher says, that this illusion of factuality is produced by the lack of any resolution to the mystery. And I think that is quite important. I don't want to kind of have an end point to this. And I think that's why it perhaps could go on for a while. But I enjoy the fact that perhaps this confusion and this mythic time, it's almost like in reality, sometimes there isn't a resolution to the mystery. That's only kind of often in kind of TV and films, but it's still almost stranger when there is no resolution. And then going into kind of altered works, I really just wanted to like experiment with different ways of talking about these themes and using the photographic medium to kind of present these ideas of myth and post-truth, and how perhaps the absence within the image can say more than the subject that was already there, and can kind of, again, create this cognitive area where we're made to think more about what would have been there than immediately being told it. So again, these kind of, I guess, relate back to Barth's theory of punctum, that by kind of pricking through or opening up a photographic image, you can have a glimpse into kind of an ostensibly more authentic reality as such. So perhaps removing the object or the absence of the object within the image itself is more authentic in a way, which is interesting in itself. And then portraits, I've put a plural here, but clearly there is only one so far. I hope to take more in the future, but this is kind of what I've got at the moment. And I think a key part of this work is kind of creating this stage, almost this play, and projecting this idea of a searching for meaning upon the subject, as well as kind of my own personal searching for meaning that I think the project is also about. Yeah, so again, the whole work kind of comes back to this idea of photography being a technology of instability. It's not something, I mean, it does have obviously those indexical connotations, which is why it makes it such a fun medium to play with, that people perhaps take it for fact, but it essentially stages a play of the real and the simulated, which is what this work is all about, is creating that play, that illusion, and that mythological time. And these are the kind of just the final set of images that I wanted to talk a little bit about, and then I'll show some kind of creations of different images. So these are just images of light, which I found to be kind of nice intersections when putting the work together, because they explore in a nice way this egress that I'm talking about between one world and another, whether it be kind of our perceived reality and a different reality, or our normal reality, our physical reality, and our technological reality. But these lights are kind of representational of kind of movements and energies, and things that can't really exist on their own. They're either reflections of something, or we can't perceive them without the eye of the camera. So that's what they're kind of there for. But yeah, I'll just finish off with some kind of creations, and I think this is where the work became quite interesting for me, was piecing together these different images and symbols and seeing how many different meanings they could potentially have, and how all of these combinations comes up with different ideas. So there again, kind of using a different form of the image and another image together. But what I became aware of is that, looking at kind of Derrida's ideas of language and sign systems, the images themselves, they are a language, much like myth, and they have the capacity to mean much more than one thing, and they are continuously modified and nuanced. And I think that is kind of even more pertinent in our digital age. So images are everywhere, and they're consumed in such different contexts, in such different ways, that I almost want to keep creating these different formations of images to lead to different kind of conclusions or slightly different storylines. So that's kind of those last two, using similar images. But I think that's where it's kind of become really interesting for me, is playing on this kind of indexical quality that people presume photography to have, and creating this sense of a lack of time and a space with that medium. So yeah, I think that's kind of all from me so far. Let's stop sharing.
Cool, right. Thanks a lot, Anna. I think that was such a full and rounded presentation. If anyone has any questions, just kind of hit it in the chat. But I think it's interesting how you mentioned about this whole idea of if humans were just a feedback loop within a huge system, it would be quite a sad thing to think about, isn't it?
Yeah.
And this whole idea of nature and technology, and how humans at first thought that nature was something that was predictable and something that has cycles, but as they conduct more experiments, they just realize that nature was just nature, and it just did whatever it wants. And I'm sure you mentioned about Curtis as well.
Yeah.
Is that Adam Curtis or?
Yeah, it's Adam Curtis.
Yeah. So was that in the BBC documentary, one of the?
Yeah, I think it was. Was it Watched Over by Machines of Love and Grace? The one.
Oh, yeah.
It was really interesting. And they almost talked about these communities in the 60s that went to kind of live in their own spaces. And then it kind of talked about these geodesic domes and things like that. And I just found it, completely fascinating how they kind of predicted nature as being this self-maintaining thing, as stable, but in actual fact it just wasn't.
Yeah, interesting thing about I mean your entire body of work is such an eclectic collection of archival images, constructs, even collection of photographs, and also other than I understand that at the last slides of your presentation you have some layout mock-ups. Right? So I presume that you're making it a zine, but is there any other way that you're thinking of presenting your work to kind of consolidate this whole very, very big idea and big things that you're trying to talk about?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question, and one I don't quite know the answer to yet. I'm kind of in the process of making my zine, but I think kind of what I was getting at towards the end is that this idea of perhaps having a kind of an online space where maybe the user could kind of impact the storyline as such, and kind of create their own combination of images, and kind of almost go what I was going through as the creator, but from a different perspective, to create this different, almost these different myths and these different kind of settings within the images would be something really cool to do, is have it on that kind of that online space, because it is such a kind of a broad kind of set of work, it does become quite transient in itself. And so for it to be reflected within that space would be quite nice.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, and I if I recall correctly, I mean, you spoke about like different chapters as well that you're looking, and I felt like as the you know, when you present images and as the series goes on, it's almost like we are between worlds. You know, we are going into different, like it's almost like something uncanny and familiar, and you almost kind of like merge like time and space together. I think one of the images that particularly like kind of like resonated with me is the one with the harsh flesh, and there's a lot of like roots climbing on the walls.
Which one was that?
The black and white one.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, because I mean that reminds me of, like, you know, the crevices of like networks, you know, technology, and how, you know, the whole technological revolution was, you know, was supposed to be something like, oh, you know, we're gonna connect the world, we're gonna make the world a better place, and you know, it's almost like the driving force of globalization and things like that, and in the internet as we know now. You know, we understand. I mean, it's a cautionary tale, because good things can happen, but equally very bad things could happen as well. And yeah, I think that's me rambling. But
no, I feel that, and I think what is quite interesting about that image, I almost had that same thought in the way these branches don't meet. Is kind of quite interesting. This kind of attempt at connecting a world that perhaps has inadvertently made it more disconnected at its core.
Yeah, no, for sure. And like, I mean, if we think about like technology as well, and you know, this whole idea of like, are we controlling technology, or is technology controlling us? And I don't mean that in a very like dystopic sci-fi way, Frankenstein kind of thing, where we create like Boston Dynamic robots and they kind of like take over us. But I think I mean it in a more subtle way. Like for example, like social media companies have successfully privatized personalities as well.
Yeah.
If I'm not wrong, I think the engineers have boiled down to like a select number of like personalities like someone could be, you know, and kind of like use the algorithm to like kind of like always like constantly like curate something for their feed. And in a certain sense, like we think that we are in control, but behind the machine there are the invisible forces kind of like shaping us. So
yeah, and that in itself is kind of, even though you say it not in this obvious sort of dystopian way, it is almost more scary or kind of more eerie in the way that we're not noticing that happening, and that it may kind of be dictating our time on these technologies and what we're doing without kind of being immediately aware of it.
Yeah, no, for sure. And it's this whole idea of like, you know, for example, like I'm really just like plugging Adam Curtis's documentary. I think
you really are.
But it's this whole idea of like we all know that the world's in shambles. Like we all know that social media is fake. We all know that it's curated. We all know that there is an algorithm running it. But
Jasper, big up that.
Yeah, we all know that, you know, everything is fake, but we kind of still choose to believe it. And that's the whole hypothesis of what Adam Curtis calls hypernormalization. And yeah, no, but very interesting body of work. Hopefully we get to see like some install shots, or like your work culminating into like a exhibition. And
I hope so. I'll crack on with that.
Yeah.
Just like I'm not sure I have a question, but I really enjoyed that, Anna.
Thank you, Jasper.
Comment, like, there's the sort of visual style that I can see like developing in the series. Like I don't know if I can articulate it, but I think it's just really sort of interesting, I guess. And one of the thoughts I was sort of like considering while you were showing that was, to me, it's almost like if you know, if like an alien photojournalist landed on Earth and was sort of trying to like capture, you know, what this weird dominant race is like, you know, dominant species on this kind of blue planet. It has this kind of otherworldliness to it that yeah, I just think is really kind of thought provoking.
Oh, thank you. And I think that is a wonderful perspective. I wish that would happen.
I mean it as a compliment, obviously.
Yeah, no, I do. I wish some alien would kind of come round with me and help me take these images.
Yeah.
I'd be like, oh, that's a bit strange. I think it would point me kind of more in the right direction. But I think what's so interesting about that is simply by almost taking these images or, you know, kind of reading up about it, it becomes kind of more profoundly, I don't know, real how strange things can be. I mean, especially that the image of the kind of the circuit board that I just got off of Facebook Marketplace for free, and I was just kind of looking at all of these tiny little bits that had to be in the right place with all of these tiny little connections, and I was like, you know, to me, I use this technology every day, but not once have I seen a circuit board in my life. I don't understand how this works or what is going on, but I use this and I consume it so much. But looking at the inside of it is alien to me.
Sure, yeah, it's super thought provoking.
Yeah, it's really interesting.
Yeah, no, just jumping off Jasper's like comment / question. I think how the different like archival images that you use, you know, there was one with like a circle and there are like lines. I'm not sure what that is.
Which one was it? Was it the blue one?
No, it's just this like it has like a white background and they have like different like lines connecting. It's almost like a mathematical like pattern.
Yeah, the like geometric kind of symbol thing. Yeah.
Yeah, the geometric symbol kind of thing. And anyway, it kind of reminds me of like technology and this whole like hyper rationalization of life.
Mm-hmm.
And how you know it's connected to like power, how it's connected, especially with the fighter jet and all. Yeah, I can't find the words to articulate it, but I think it's all like coming together to kind of like sum up like technology and its histories and things like that.
I think that's really interesting as well, because there is that kind of element of control, and like you said, it is at the moment it is this. Yeah, it kind of links back to Jonathan Crary's book that I was reading a while ago about this kind of this non-time, because of this kind of 24/7 consumption that we have been made to have because of capitalism and because of these technologies, attempting to control kind of almost every part of our life in a sense.
Yeah. I think Liz has a question. Sorry, Lizzie has a question. Really interesting how you are combining medium and space, showing this idea of time and space. Sorry, that's not correct. That's more of a comment. But
thank you very much.
Yeah, if not, I think we can move on to Jess. But thank you so much, Anna, for presenting your work. And
thanks for having me, guys. It's been wonderful. Stay tuned.
Stay tuned. Okay. Cool. Hi. Okay. So hi Jess. Thanks for sparing your time on an Easter bank holiday to come speak and present your work. So thought maybe I should give like a short introduction first. So this is Jess. So Jess's work's called the Beauty That Remains. So it's an ongoing body of work by her that uses Google Street View as a vehicle to travel back in time and capture childhood memories and bring both modern technology and old alternative process together. So I think I'll hand the time over to Jess to articulate her work.
Okay. I'll just share my screen a second. Oh, can you see that?
Yep.
The big screen. So it's been quite slow.
Yeah.
I may have to turn my camera off so it will.
Oh, that's okay.
Okay.
Let's see if it goes full screen. Nah, that doesn't work. Nah. Oh wait, no, it works. Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, Cool.
Okay, so I'm going to be talking about my 2 projects. So this is the one I did. My previous project is The Beauty That Remains, and I'm currently working on one that's untitled. I'll explain a bit more about later. So this was sparked when I lost my great nan last year at the beginning of lockdown, and it kind of resurfaced all these memories and undealt with grief that I've experienced with other family members. So this whole project was about being able to like deal with this grief that I haven't really confronted before, and being confronted by these archive images that I have of my family helped with this healing process, as well as the process of cyanotype that I used itself, and being able to like just go and make them and be in this own little world where it's just me and the images. So I also spoke about how the natural world has helped me with the grief process and linking my present with the past of those who I've lost, and using these images to connect with these people through the medium of photography. Materiality has also been very important to all of my work, this one included, being able to physically hold the work then and actually like reconnecting with these memories and like holding it, as well as being able to see the images. And using the cyanotype has also been like a creative outlet for me, and being able to like let loose of my emotions, making all of these markings. So I also created double exposures for this series of work. I mainly used images that I felt didn't really work with the cyanotype. But I feel like they still depict memory, nostalgia and grief, but in a different way. And they allow the past and the present to live within the same frame, and merging the lines between realities. So there's those ones. Okay, this is my current work that I'm working on. It's currently untitled, so I'll just explain a bit about what I'm doing. So I'm using Google Street View to kind of go back and capture memories from my childhood, carrying on from my last project about like grief and memory of these people I've lost, but rather than focusing on the people themselves, I'm focusing on the memories and experiences I had with these people. And due to lockdown and not being able to travel, I've turned to the world of Google Street View, and I found it really interesting because there's a feature on there where I can turn back time and go back to when I was actually experiencing these memories, so like 2008 time when these people were alive, and actually being able to like relive it. Yeah, so memories is a big focus on this project. When we remember things and places and people, and it's never really perfect, and there's always pieces missing, and we often only remember bits that we want to remember. And similar to Street View images, there's always like glitches and parts that like duplicate, and they're never really perfect. And that's kind of like the whole idea I wanted to get through, of how like remembering, but then it's never the same. And I've made some of them like the darker, fading to light, just like how memory fades. So with my cyanotype prints, that eventually they're all going to fade away to nothing, but how some memories, they can be like quite dark and vivid, whereas others, like the previous images here, are quite light and faded away. So another process I've been looking at within this body of work is anthrotypes. So these images are made through natural ingredients, so like kind of flowers, plants, everything natural, and they're made into be able to paint on the paper and process them in the sun. So I really like the idea of how like they fade away to nothing over time, and how this all links back to like memory, and how your memories eventually fade away. But also this like cycle of almost like life cycle of the materials and the images themselves, and how they're printed, they fade away, and then also you can bring it back and reprint them again. So it's like this constant cycle. And I feel this also works with like memory, like you remember stuff and then it slowly fades away again, and then like it resurfaces again. So I've also used the old archive images that I used in my first project, The Beauty That Remains. And the whole idea with this was that when I install, I kind of have a room where you walk in and you see all the people in this process that's slowly fading in the sun. And then you walk through into the other room where all the cyanotypes of the Google Street images would be. So yeah, that's it.
Thanks a lot, Jess. Yeah, I've always known your work, but I think to see it in its full like broader scope, I think it's really nice. Maybe if you can like stop sharing and just like
Yeah, sorry, it's just
that's okay.
okay.
That's okay. Yeah, no. I think one. I mean, the obvious thing that stands out of your work is the use of like cyanotypes in your work, and maybe if you like to like kind of like elaborate like how this whole like process, this whole physical process of making cyanotypes inform your work and what you're trying to like what you're trying to say.
Yeah, so I feel like the use of cyanotypes is because when you like hold something physically, you connect a lot more with it, and the whole like cyanotype process itself was very much like, I don't know, I found it therapeutic for me making them, but also like that physicality is also really important to my work because I didn't want these images I'm making of like people I've lost just to kind of sit in a computer. I wanted them to exist physically and where people can go and see them. So yeah, that's why I chose that kind of process.
Yeah, and you talk about like anthotypes.
Anthotypes, yeah.
So it's making imagery through exposing them to the sun. But yeah, so I'm not very sure about that, but maybe you can explain about anthotypes and how it's being made.
Yeah, so I start off with a natural source, so with flowers or spinach I use for the green ones, and you kind of pestle and mortar it down to like a liquid and mix in with alcohol, and you paint onto a surface, and then you expose a positive image just in the sun. So I put it in my window for a week, and that's what I came out with. And I thought it was really interesting how like there was no harmful chemicals involved. Like it was really like natural, and how it's similar to like the whole life cycle and memories. It's all like really naturally formed, and then it naturally goes away again.
Yeah, cool. And I think I saw like one thing that springs to mind when speaking about your work is obviously we have to go back to Roland Barthes and how he talks about the depth of the image within the photographs, and how he sees, when he sees images, he just sees something that's decaying and dying, and which is really informed by a process. I remember you if I remember you speaking about how these prints are actually alive. Organic. They're not static. There's something that's living and breathing. And yeah, I don't know if you have anything to add on to this whole idea of the depth of the image and how.
Yeah, so I really like how it kind of, the depth of the image just kind of fades away, and then you can like reprint them because of the nature of the process. It's so easy to just go over, and you can like reprint them again. I really like that whole cycle.
Yeah, no, I think the last point that I have is oops, someone's mic is on. Okay, never mind, it's fine. But okay, yeah. Anyway, what was I saying? Yeah, this whole idea, the second project they have that's presently untitled, and how you're using Google Street View to like kind of like go back into the past.
Yes.
So. Is there any significance of you? Do you think for yourself, is there any significance of you? Because I feel like you're almost like a voyager, going back to the past and trying to like recapture those memories. Is almost like blurring and like merging realities. So, and you're almost like observing how we live from a distant past, which is so readily available like on the internet. So. It's like almost like memories like stored permanently somewhere, and it's this whole idea as well that humans, that we want to like capture things, we want to imprint things, and that's why I guess that's like the basis of art. If you talk about cave paintings and things like that. Yeah. Cool. Let's see. Okay. So Anna has a question. So she says, hey Jess. Really beautiful work. Just wondering what you see the final presentation of this project to be.
Yeah, so it'd definitely be like an installation, and I wanted all my anthrotypes to kind of be on a wall and have a window, and the sun constantly like slowly fading them away. So when you start at the beginning, like if you go to the installation at the start, you kind of see these images like how they were printed, and then as you go back and visit later on, they're kind of like completely gone. And I really like that kind of engaging, like how you can go, it's like constantly changing even through the presentation of it, and to the point where at the end where I won't have anything left. So I thought that's quite that's pretty much how I'd present it, with that room with the anthrotypes and then the cyanotypes being either on another room or on the walls where the sun isn't directly exposing.
Cool. So yeah, Lizzie has a question saying cyanotype is a very traditional process. It's really nice how this links with your use of old images, bring them alive again and giving them a new view. So do you think this way of printing old images changes the view you first had of them?
Yeah, definitely, especially with the archive images I had, because there's so much involved with handling the images throughout the whole process. Like the way you look at them definitely changes, especially like to begin with, that I kind of like felt really emotional looking at them and kind of like upset. But the more I dealt with it throughout the process, it came to more of like an acceptance of all this loss and turning it into something like beautiful that can live. Like that's kind of why I called it the beauty that remains. So yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Emma has another question. So, when using Street View, have you found a lot of things appear differently to how you remembered them? Such an interesting concept! Exclamation mark.
Yeah, so it was really weird, like going back and looking at all these places that I haven't even visited since I was a child, and like kind of thinking I remembered them in one way, and then when I looked it up, it's kind of like completely different. And especially with like all the glitches that happen in Google Street View, it's kind of strange, but it's also like resurfaced so much looking back at them and stuff I didn't even remember I had, like wandering about in a place and thinking, oh, I actually do remember like these places that you completely forgot about. Yeah.
Yeah. So on Instagram we have Malcolm. So his question is, were there any locations where Street View was not able to show you?
Yeah, so that's like the only downfall with this part, was it is very much restricted to roads and sometimes like the places where other people have filmed. Like they can use other people who have gone around and taken photos that are on Google Street View. Yeah, so I found it quite difficult some parts, like been quite restricted to certain places. Whereas if this was like out of lockdown, I would have actually gone to these places myself. So I guess like in the future, if I were to continue this, I could do a mixture of both. Like those places where I was restricted, I can go and visit in person.
Cool. Yeah, I think. Yeah, no, I think that's a question. But I kind of want to like jump back on this whole idea of using printing Google Street View on cyanotypes, because I think that's a particularly like interesting concept of merging technology. There's so many elements going on there. So now I think the first one is like technology, so-called non-human photography, and then the second one is the whole idea of like going back into the past, going back to the archives of Google Street View, and I think that the third one is you mentioning that the cyanotype is something that's living and breathing. So, do you have any like particular like significance?
Yeah, so I really like how I'm kind of using this modern technology and kind of like not like making it physical. Like you'd never get a Google Street View physical unless I was using this process, because a lot of them as well, I kind of drew on them, painted on them once I had printed them off, and then I rescanned them and then turned them into cyanotypes. So it's kind of like that whole process was like, it was kind of crazy thinking that they came from just the internet and now they're like actual physical things that will fade away.
Yeah, cool. And and it's also like I mean, like you mentioned again, it's about allowing the past and present to live within the same frame. Whereas I guess traditionally, if you take the photograph of thing, it just ceases to exist there. Whereas things just like go in like a continuous loop, I guess. But yeah, so if anyone has any like last minute questions, you can like just unmute your mic. If not, yeah, thank you very much, Jess, for presenting your work. And I think this brings us to the end of today's program. So for anyone listening out in the metaverse on Instagram and anyone on the call, we have talks lined up tomorrow. So we have Miles Critchley Hope and Luke Brotherwood presenting at 10 in the morning, and we have Corey House Collective coming to talk about their practice at 12. So thank you very much, Jess, and have a good Easter bank holiday, everyone. Okay.